physics feels limitless. Every decade, it explains phenomena that once seemed mysterious or impossible. It reveals the structure of atoms, the origin of stars, the evolution of the universe, the behavior of time and space. This success creates a quiet assumption that physics will eventually explain everything, that no mystery is permanent, only postponed. But physics itself tells a different story. There are things it can never explain, not because it has failed, not because we lack data, but because of what physics is. And understanding these limits matters more than any single discovery. Physics explains how systems behave given laws and initial conditions. It tells you what follows from what. But it does not explain why those laws exist, why those initial conditions were chosen, or why there is a framework in which laws can operate at all. These questions sit outside its scope. They are not unsolved problems waiting for better experiments. They are boundaries built into the method itself. This becomes clear the moment you ask the simplest possible question: why are there laws of physics? Physics can describe the laws with astonishing precision. It can test them, refine them, unify them. But it cannot justify them. There is no equation that explains why this set of laws exists rather than another, or why any laws exist at all. The laws are inputs to the theory, not outputs. Even attempts to derive them from deeper principles simply shift the question. Why do those deeper principles exist? Why those symmetries? Why those mathematical structures? The chain does not end. Physics always starts with something given. This reveals a fundamental asymmetry. Physics explains consequences, not existence. It explains behavior, not being. This distinction is easy to miss because explanations within physics feel so deep. But depth is not the same as foundation. Even a theory of everything, if one exists, would still assume the existence of a mathematical framework in which the theory is written. It would still assume logic. It would still assume consistency. Those assumptions are not explained by physics. They are presupposed by it. Another limit appears when physics confronts meaning. Physics can describe the neural processes underlying thought. It can correlate brain states with experiences. It can predict behavior, but it cannot explain why experiences feel like anything from the inside. It cannot explain why consciousness exists rather than unconscious processing. This is not a gap in neuroscience waiting to be filled by better instruments. It is a category difference. Physics describes third-person structure. Experience is first-person. No amount of objective description produces subjective presence. This is not a failure of physics. It is a reminder of what physics describes. Physics also cannot explain why mathematics describes reality so well. It can use mathematics. It can extend it. It can discover deeper mathematical structures. But it cannot explain why those structures map onto the physical world. The unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics remains unexplained because any explanation would itself be mathematical. The mystery folds back on itself. Physics stands on mathematics without grounding it. That dependence is invisible until you look for it. Another boundary appears with initial conditions. Physics can evolve a system forward or backward in time once initial conditions are specified, but it cannot explain why those conditions existed. Why did the universe begin in a low entropy state? Why were the constants set to life-permitting values? Why this configuration rather than another? These questions are not answerable within physics because physics does not generate initial conditions. It assumes them. Even speculative ideas like multiverses do not eliminate the problem. They relocate it. Why does the multiverse exist? Why do its laws exist? Why does it generate universes at all? Physics extends explanation outward, but it cannot close the loop. The most unsettling limit comes when physics confronts its own success. The more accurately physics describes reality, the clearer its boundaries become. It becomes obvious that explanation does not converge to a final reason. It converges to a description that works. Physics does not aim to explain why reality is intelligible. It takes intelligibility as a fact. It does not explain why explanation itself is possible. It assumes it. These limits matter because they shape how you interpret knowledge. If you believe physics will eventually explain everything, you will treat unanswered questions as temporary ignorance. But some unanswered questions are not ignorance. They are edges. Misunderstanding this leads to confusion. People try to force physics to answer questions it cannot answer. When it fails, they assume something else must step in to complete the picture. But the correct conclusion is simpler. Physics is not incomplete because it has limits. It is complete because it knows where its limits are. These limits also protect physics from overreach. Physics does not need to explain meaning to be powerful. It does not need to explain existence to be valid. It needs only to do what it does extraordinarily well: describe patterns, regularities, and relationships within the universe. Expecting it to do more misunderstands its role. At the same time, acknowledging these limits changes how you see reality. It removes the illusion that everything reduces to equations. It leaves room for mystery without invoking ignorance. It allows you to distinguish between what can be explained and what can only be acknowledged. This is not a retreat from reason. It is an extension of it. Knowing the limits of explanation is part of understanding. The deepest mistake is to assume that what cannot be explained is unreal or irrelevant. Meaning, experience, existence itself do not become less real because physics cannot explain them. They become more interesting. They mark the boundary where description ends and presence begins. Physics maps the territory of behavior with extraordinary precision. It does not tell you why there is territory at all. And that is not a flaw. It is a feature. Because explanation requires a background to operate. Physics operates within reality. It does not generate reality. The universe is not an equation waiting to be solved. It is a fact waiting to be described, and description, no matter how deep, does not turn into justification. This matters because it humbles certainty. It reminds you that understanding does not mean total comprehension. You can know how something works without knowing why it exists. You can map reality without owning it. Physics teaches this lesson implicitly. The moment you expect it to answer every question, you stop listening to what it actually says. What physics can never explain is not a weakness. It is a boundary that keeps explanation honest. And within that boundary, physics remains one of the most powerful ways we have ever found to understand the universe. But beyond it, there is silence. Not because the universe is empty, but because explanation has reached its edge. This is Veritas Labs, where truth is tested.